Now what I'd like to move on to is our last speaker, and to see in my, let's say, my hometown of Abu Dhabi, and the developments in Abu Dhabi and the migration from Mina Zayed to Khalifa Port. So this is going to be a very interesting presentation, I think, for all of us. The speaker, I'm delighted to be joined today by Eryn Dinyovszky, who is the Transition Project Manager for Abu Dhabi Terminals. A little bit about Eryn. She was appointed the Transition Project Manager at Abu Dhabi Terminals in 2010, with the responsibility of setting up the project team and implementing a semi-automated terminal. It's quite a straightforward responsibility, isn't it, Eryn? Prior to joining Abu Dhabi Terminals, Eryn worked for AP Muller Group for 10 years in both line operations and at APM terminals in various positions. And her education is rooted in the maritime sector, as she holds a degree in marine transportation and has an MBA from the BI Norwegian School of Management. So I will give a warm welcome, please, to Eryn, who's going to talk to us about, give a critical analysis of terminal development in the Gulf region and why it will continue to thrive despite the global economic slowdown. Please.
Thank you, John, and good afternoon to the audience. As John mentioned, my name is Eryn. I'm from Abu Dhabi Terminals, and I've been the project transition manager for ADT and Port Khalifa. As some of you might know, we have an existing terminal in Mina Zayed that was due to be transferred over to Port Khalifa in 2012. So starting off there, I'd like to take you a little bit through the background of Abu Dhabi Terminals, and we had some good discussion about port authorities versus terminal operator. So some of you might have seen the ADPC logos and ADPC sponsor. In essence, they're the port authority of Abu Dhabi, not only over Mina Zayed, but also over Port Khalifa. And Abu Dhabi Terminals is the operator. Now, interesting enough, we have a shareholding structure where we have also the Port Authority taking a share in the operations company, along with Mubadala Infrastructure Partners and Mubadala Investment. So we have not only the Port Authority, we have the government, but also with Mubadala Infrastructure Partners, we see some external financing coming in as well. We have a current concession agreement to run Mina Zayed, which expires in 2013, and we're looking forward to a 30-year relationship from January 1 with ADPC for Khalifa Port. Just a little bit about some of the activities. I know we've been focusing on container terminals, and I will continue to focus on Khalifa Port container terminals. But it's also important to mention a lot of the other cargo that is coming through Abu Dhabi, which is also part of the strategic vision, and part of what we'll talk about is going to develop the overall port effectiveness and profitability. You see RoRo, right? You have a gateway for cars coming into the Abu Dhabi, UAE, have a lot of heavy project cargo. And I'll talk about that in a minute when you look at all of the infrastructure development projects that Abu Dhabi has. So there is a need for some of this project cargo. We also have warehousing facilities, and there's a few key customers such as Barouge, where you see this integrated logistics warehousing ports concept also being a core strength. And then you have the general cargo piece, which is also part of the portfolio right now of Abu Dhabi Terminals. So when we look at the GCC, as John also said, it's a little bit of a bright story everywhere. If you look at an average growth rate exceeding world averages, right, looking at 4%, and split in between Saudi, UAE, Qatar, and others. So it's still a pretty good picture. The real question then is why, and what supports that? How can Abu Dhabi and the UAE actually continue with that type of growth? So one of the things you see is a very robust macroeconomic environment. You see capitalized bank sectors. You see people very keen to run projects, and I know that fund projects. And I know that question came up earlier, and some of it, yes, is supported by the government, but that ambition is still there. You see infrastructure investments. A few of the speakers mentioned rail, airports. So that key infrastructure that might have not been so developed in the past is really coming into play. And that alone brings in engineers, brings in equipment, brings in quite a bit of cargo that needs to enter and exit the country. And then, of course, you have the solid natural resource base. You know, I would be amiss for not mentioning it here. That is a strong base. We also, especially in Abu Dhabi, see a visionary, right? We see strong economic strategies. Abu Dhabi is looking to diversify. We see projects like the Louvre, we see energy projects, we see hospitals, schools. So there's quite a bit of developments moving towards tourism, moving towards education, those different type of sectors. And we see long-term strategies, and that's something that's important because when you look at Khalifa Port in a few minutes, you'll see that it's a bit about the end game, right? It's a bit about really supporting Abu Dhabi with a strong infrastructure. And then we also have these changing regulations. As we mentioned, there's attractive tax incentives. We have these free zones that are also coming into play. Foreign ownership is starting to become the norm here, and I think Andre also mentioned that. So although the changes sometimes can be a little bit slow or frustrating, right, they are really underpinning and really advancing the UAE and the region in the right direction. Just a quick look at all these projects that are out there between mega airports, ship repair facilities, and new ports. So it might be a little bit small for you guys to see, but almost all those dots represent something that's being built in the region. And that also goes a bit to what John was saying, right? Is this really sustainable? Can this really be true? You'll also see on here the rail link. Right? So with the development of the rail, we also have potential game changers that are coming in. And how is that really, at least from Abu Dhabi's point of view, really going to support, and where does Khalifa Port really fit in? So just a quick look, and again, taking back to container terminals, looking at the regional market and zooming in a bit on the capacity. So while with all those dots on the map, it might look like that there's an overabundance of capacity. And most terminal operators will tell you that 100% capacity utilization is just is death, right? You like to be somewhere around 70 and 85%. So you need to keep that in mind when you're looking at overall capacity utilization. But you can see in 2012, 14, and 16, the gap in the region is really not that big if you look at the overall projections. Zooming a little bit further, just down to Abu Dhabi. So the joke is always, what is the capacity in Mina Zayed? Because 5-6 years ago, nobody would ever believe that we could have gotten the volume through Mina Zayed that we did. And what you see is in 2011 and 2012, we were operating over capacity. And I'm sure if some of you remember some of the challenges we had keeping that infrastructure, keeping the equipment, keeping Abu Dhabi's main gateway available to be able to service the customers. Yeah. Yeah. So this kind of sets a scene. So while it might look like in the region that there is an overcapacity, right? If you zoom down, at least speaking from the Abu Dhabi side, there still was a heavy need to be able to develop and to be able to offer infrastructure and to be able to help the market reach some of these economic goals that the government has. Just a quick view, the Abu Dhabi 2030 vision is really an amazing document. I would challenge any of you, if you have the time, to Google it and read about it. It is truly ambitious, and it's really fantastic to be part of that ambition. I won't say it's always easy, but that ambition is something that makes Abu Dhabi very, very special. So here's just a view of the percentage of population growth that Abu Dhabi is expecting. And this is supported by all of these different projects and all of the different growth and supporting factors that I mentioned earlier. Again, just another view at the GDP growth in millions from Drewry, specifically in Abu Dhabi. Here you can also see the diversification away from the oil. And it's not a necessarily new strategy. Dubai has been after that for a while and succeeding very well in most of the other GCCs. But it is very important to see how that then fits into what the ports and what the infrastructure needs to cater for and what is necessarily the priorities of that. So then a little bit about Port Khalifa. So you all obviously are very familiar with Jebel Ali, and a little bit unlike Andre, most people know where Abu Dhabi is these days. But Port Khalifa is located in between Dubai and Abu Dhabi, exit 37D1, in an area called Tawila. There's also a natural gas power plant there, and actually, Port Khalifa has been open since 2010, serving EMAL vessels, right? So Port Khalifa in general has been there. It's really the container terminal aspect that is relatively new and went operational September 1 of this year. We talk about free zones. So from here, you can also see some of the pictures. The orange will be the first phase of development, the second phase of development, and then all of the hinterland on the other side of the E11, which is Sheikh Zayed Road. So there's quite a bit of land out there. There's quite a bit of infrastructure that's already starting to be developed. The next question I usually get at this point, because Port Khalifa is a semi-automated terminal. So that means we have invested heavily in technology and automation. And sometimes, if you look at the main cost drivers of a terminal, and of course we know cost and volume and revenue are key to the success here, I get a question of why the terminal is semi-automated. Why do you actually go for automation when you have such a low labor cost? Besides Peter's comment earlier that labor costs tend to be rising because we're competing over the talent, that's one aspect of it. But we also see other value in a semi-automated terminal. I also was pleased to see the doctor's presentation where he mentioned that some of these advanced technologies need to come in to move us to that next level. So they do bring value. They have just baseline value in some of the environmental footprints. Electric RTGs have, or electric ASCs have less of an impact. You see quite a bit of productivity gains in just removing the manual factor of operating a piece of equipment. The cranes can travel at 5.7 meters per second without anybody shaking, right? Without anybody taking a yawn. They're pretty impressive. Then we also like to use that automation and that technology to really serve the customer better. Faster, reliable, less variation in the overall process of productivity. We also like to link that. Once you have most of your data inside some sort of system, you can implement things like a port community system. You can move into online bookings. You can move into appointment systems. So it really gives you a platform that you can advance some of the customer value, right, in terms of streamlining and working with them to streamline some of the process. And then last but not least, of course, there's shareholder value, which is on the top of most people's agenda. Maybe it should actually go on the other side. But looking at building infrastructure, it is not cheap. No matter where you are, no matter what year you invest, core infrastructure is expensive. So when you are building an island offshore, you want to make sure you get every ground slot, every possible inch of that terminal utilized for what your core money driver is, which is containers. So with the automation, you're able to develop that a bit more. Just a bit also about the operational costs, looking at overall variable costs between something like an RTG, a straddle carrier, and an ASC yard. So you see in the long run as well that your variable cost, while it continues to rise with age and utilization, doesn't necessarily have as high as impact as something like an RTG or a terminal tractor. So now probably onto the core question that I think John actually posed earlier. So why Khalifa? What value does Khalifa have as opposed to a Jebel Ali or even a Mina Zayed? And from ADT, we strongly believe that the O&D, or the local import-export, or mainly import market in Abu Dhabi, truly needed to be revolutionized. You had 40 years of institution built up around Mina Zayed, and while it was working, it needed optimization. And as some of you have probably gone through changes in your career or changes in locations of terminals and ports, that's pretty hard to affect. And one of the fastest way to do that is open up a new port and start from scratch. So that's effectively what we had the opportunity to do. And in that process, try to work with the stakeholders, such as Customs, such as Ministry of Environment, to actually advance. One of the ways I like to look at it is almost like an airport. 10 years ago, you would go to a travel agency and you would book your trip, and they would print out a ticket for you, and you would go to the airport, right? And now we're trying to move from that to let's book your ticket online and get to the security check with your BlackBerry as your pass, right? So you can imagine trying to affect that and the value that you can create for your customer, and not only for Abu Dhabi or for the company, is pretty substantial. That doesn't come without risks, right? Moving that fast tends to be challenging, and sometimes those processes aren't maybe as optimized as they could have been. So just Port Khalifa as a container terminal, with the semi-automation, as I mentioned, the capacity right now at 1.2 million TEUs, with already orders for next equipment to take us up to 2.5, with infrastructure already developed to be able to expand just with equipment up to 5 million TEU. You have the KEZAD, or the free zone, which is also one of those drivers as well. Maybe also at this point, just a bit about the transition. September 1, the port opened commercially, and by December 15th, Mina Zayed will be more or less free of containers, and that means that we've effectively transitioned 100% of the container volume over to Port Khalifa. Yeah. Thank you. It's a bit of a challenge, right, to move that fast, but the urgency underpinned by the overall infrastructure and the optimization that we think we can get from, that we know we can get from Khalifa, has really been driving that. It's also fair to say that without the support of ADPC, who is in essence the landlord and developer of the infrastructure, and some of the key clients and key stakeholders such as the trucking community and the shipping lines, it's been quite a bit of a fun ride the past few months. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Eryn. Thanks very much.